Hello, I'm back with another video, and I just wanted to tap in real quick with a little inspiration, but also clarity to three previous videos, but the first of which that I've made referencing red flags, and I wanted to tie a couple ends that I may have left loose with that, and then also offer something part of that, but a different spin. So I'm still a little bit new to content creation, and I have enough awareness to recognize that I can't be leaving, I can't make loose statements or leave things open-ended and like lead into a topic and then not finish the idea or discussion. I've watched a lot of content over a long phase, and there have been sometimes different content creators, the actual strongest message that they ever got close to expressing, they left it undone, and then they actually didn't finish that statement or sentence, and then in some cases they've actually passed away, and they didn't actually get off what might have been their most insightful insight or message. That is kind of a little bit of a tragedy when I've seen that happen before. But I had referenced, so I was talking in that video about the three underlying influences that are fashioning experience, reality, and also beings from the Eastern tradition, being I had mentioned the Rahasic or Rajasic, I don't know if you pronounce that J, Raja, in the Bharata Dharma, which is like the faith of India, generally speaking, in practice. I know I'm going way past what I can articulate with anything to do with the history or the traditions of India or the East in general, but I have studied the works of the canon of Arthur Avalon as it pertains to Tantra, yoga, and then the Bharata Dharma, which is I think Bharata is a word for India, and Dharma is like the cause and effect, or the morality that regulates reality, and that reality could not sustain and exist without reciprocity and equity, which is what Arthur Avalon expresses and does it generally within the umbrella of Bharata Dharma. So I'm speaking from familiarity with some of his works. With what I'm saying here is that he expresses that there are three underlying influences that are ever active and present in the manifesting, the fashioning and unfolding of the universe, and then also experiences inside the universe and beings in the universe, being the Rahasic, which is like an active influence, then the Tamasic, which is like a self-interested influence, and then strangely sometimes when I'm engaging with when I'm speaking, whether to a person or on camera, sometimes I can't grasp names or vocabulary terms that would normally be more easily graspable. Something about speaking, sometimes we can't actually access certain terms if we're not using them recently. But the word I was looking for was sattva. So that is the bigness of recognizing the well-being of others, and also the identity of ourselves being in another and another being in ourselves. That's the sattva that tempers and balances the self-interest and the activity of unfolding. And I had also mentioned that these correspond with deities in some of the Bharata Dharma, or the traditions of India. And and just to actually, I should probably be diligent and actually cite the names of those if I'm going to bring that up. And so and this is generally speaking, as I understand, is you have that sattva, which is the enlightening and the sustaining thing that protects us and nourishes us, corresponds with a deity named Vishnu. And then the active force that really moves things and that is that makes things amount to consequence, and that gives things reality is Brahma. That's the active. And then the destructive, which destruction is actually a form of creation in this sense, and is necessary to creation. You actually can't create without destructing, and you can't destruct without creating. Kind of like how if you were to build a new building or skyscraper, you have to break whatever's there down to below the earth, and really get to the bedrock if you're going to build something up, so that that destructive force is not creative, and it's not necessarily, it's not a detriment in itself, but it can be destructive. And that corresponds with Siva, which is a awesome deity that I can't touch upon any of those deities with my background, but I'm familiar with them in that they can correspond to these influences, and that when these deities are also those are their normal aspect, but and they can those tendencies and those propensities can be expressed in an environment and also within beings and within beings in an environment, to where sometimes when you're dealing with a person or a regular person, you can actually be interfacing with some of these propensities and these properties of the greater universe, and to a greater extent than you normally would in a very humble person or thing. If you can imagine encountering a very humble, unassuming person, yet bearing a humble yet effective weapon, or maybe a humble yet effective means of medicine, or maybe that person is in such a station where you had been stranded in inclement weather, and they're in position to either afford you or deny you the opportunity to communicate for support, and they actually have that ability to make that decision. What any of those three people could mean to you in that situation, and how you would experience the for all intents and purposes, you would experience them and their demeanor towards you and their conduct towards you as greater than what you would normally take as a human being. So in that sense, we can actually be touching upon and interfacing with very great dimensions of this reality and very humble people and things. And so that is to say that these aspects of reality, they exist in a humble, ordinary, kind of like the author Arthur Avalon also says that, like, if you have like a piece of wood, really fire exists within that wood. In all the awesomeness of fire, it is actually within that very blunt, crude and mundane wood. But it takes the conditions to activate and incite the other properties of that. And it's the same with almost anything in this universe, any degree of matter or any being, including human beings. But then as these propensities are sometimes in certain situations magnified, say like in a setting of praise, or maybe in a more daunting thing, like in a military theater, or maybe even a setting of like praise that is not to magnify life, but is to maybe maybe to invoke some of the other dimensions of reality that might not be fashionable or pretty, that doesn't have value. But all I'm saying is that these propensities, they can also exist in a higher degree, which is in India they call it Maha, means great. Like so I think like when you say like Maha, you're saying great. So there's like Maha Vishnu or Maha Brahma or Maha Siva, and these are the more formidable and awesome potential and expressions of these same properties, as they can sometimes transpire and exist as circumstances invokes them. But then I'm also saying this not to say that I'm not trying to promote. So this understanding these propensities, or then also these metaphors or understandings of personages corresponding to these propensities, it doesn't take away from the singularity of what we would know of as God or a Lord. And that so it in itself, because they are actually they can be understood to be one and the same, yet a different expression, dimension, and purpose within a greater being or consciousness, as and they also do not act without purpose or consequence, but and yet are unified. And so if you were within this tradition and canon, these would be like three facets of a greater essence and reality that we inhabit and are. And that greater sense would be what's called I think it's called like Chit Gana, or Chit is like consciousness and Gana is like massive or great. So if you were to if you were to refer to the entire potential and potence and the entire potence and potential of existence, that would be what's called Chigana, or the Lord, the one Lord, or which is actually a part of, yet transcendent and even greater than any of these three personages, as great as they are. And so that's in reciprocity with understanding there being one Lord. And that's not to say that there are different traditions, and I think even common to India and not unrelated to what I'm talking about, that appreciate there being more than one a different God or deity. But I'm not competent to speak in those terms, and I'm not versed on that. So I personally would defer to there being one Lord. But I can't speak to but I do understand that there can be different facets, and even if you observe like the teachings like of the Holy Bible, you see different dimensions and aspects and purposes of what's described as a Lord, where there can even be such things as vengeance and the Lord has been described as a man of war or a man of battle. Yet is also described as love. So that if some of the most tender people that I've ever known in my life have been some of the most formidable people, and that's actually part of the awesomeness of them as human beings and mortals. But then also this greater reality is that when you're really in the presence of something or someone awesome, part of the awesomeness is that there's a multifacetedness of their of who and what they are that amounts to dynamism and range of purpose, ability, intention, and a capacity that's part of being awesome. And it's the same in a human being, but I think it could actually almost be the same in reality itself, is that reality is multifaceted and has different aspects in different circumstances. And that doesn't take away from the unity, the harmony, or the beauty of reality, but it's just a way of understanding how reality is unfolding and fashioning our experiences. So that's a little bit where I was coming from with those, when I was referring to these influences that are present with us and that are eternal and eternal. It's almost kind of like rock, paper, scissors, where there's a balance, so that nothing gets completely out of proportion or out of control. You have the destruction, the protection, and the motion. So that's where I was coming from, just to clarify those statements. But then the last thing I wanted to say is that, and it's somewhat related to this conversation, is that I had also broached the subject of green flags. I was talking about red flags and green flags, and I'm going to level maybe what might be the greatest and most unseeming green flag that can be experienced, that can be seen in other people, but almost witnessed in ourselves. And that would be the author Arthur Avalon. He talks about how there's an understanding in India. India has, in other videos I've talked about different human families as having different strengths, generally, broadly, and almost grossly speaking. So some of like the Native Americans having a profound capacity to relate, to understand themselves, but also to relate to other humans, other beings, and the land, which are not different. And then in India, they can have a very culturally and broadly speaking, they have some awareness and insight into very subtle properties and behaviors and dimensions of both the human body itself, and then also the cosmic environment that we are beset in. And one of them is that they point out, it's within this Bharata Dharma, as Arthur Avalon articulates, is that when a person is experiencing fever, the fever is at its highest pitch right before it breaks and a person actually starts to convalesce and move towards healing. It's kind of similar to the night, where the night is at its darkest pitch right before the dawn. And I think we actually don't perceive the real dawn. Like when the influence of the sun starts to come over the earth, and the animals start to respond to it, I think there's a more subtle light or influence that preponderates before we actually recognize blatant light. There's a more subtle influence that comes with that, but it's similar with a fever or with overcoming health different challenges in health, but particularly like with fever. And so what Arthur Avalon makes the analogy and metaphor is that sometimes you will notice if you really have a faith in your life or a higher power that you actually really ponder and even defer and make decisions and maybe even chasten yourself before it to whatever extent in your behavior and your speech, you can actually become frustrated with your understanding of a higher power as sometimes as strange as that might sound. And a lot of people would if you were to see someone actually level to actually become frustrated with a higher power, that might seem like you might not know how to take that, because for one thing, if you're upset with your higher power, what recourse do you have? What alternative is there? But yet we can't experience that. But what he says is that that's actually a part of enlightenment and becoming closer to a higher deity. Is that in life we're beset with so many influences and setbacks and circumstances that we actually become jaded and also acculturated to the environment that we're in, where we see constant portrayals of every imaginable heinous action, deed, and idea. So we can't help but to be influenced and acculturated by this and have that within us, almost like an abiding fever or something that lingers in the body. But sometimes when we're actually getting close to growth and development or reaching a higher frequency of existing, we can actually become frustrated and even go so far as to blaspheme our understanding of a higher power. And what he says is that actually can be part of relinquishing the different influences that are part of us as when something is dropped, so that there can actually be, that can actually mean that we're coming closer to what we think of as a higher power. And actually whatever it is that is actually prompting us to actually have anger towards something that has incited our existence and sustains our existence, whatever challenge has brought us to that phase, that might actually be what our real testimony is, and therefore what our real praise is, and what our real praise is, our real story, and our real power, and our real ability to overcome. So whatever has brought us to that point of that much anger can actually be a part of fashioning and coming to have a real testimony and real sincere worship towards a higher power, which is inspirational and beneficial to ourselves and other people who witness our conduct. So just saying that, actually, as strange as it might sound, anger towards a higher power might actually be a green flag in a certain sense, if we can survive that without doing damage to ourselves and others and our reputation, perhaps. And then so with that, the last thing I wanted to say is that I had a lot of people talk about like street this and street that, and in the modern day, a lot of times we might not actually know what is street anymore, because for one thing, the social media has been called the streets, and it's similar to the streets in a lot of ways, where a lot of really serious stuff, both maybe enjoying maybe fun stuff, but also very serious stuff, can jump off very quickly off of social media. And then we can also be interfacing with people we don't know, who have all different backgrounds and intentions as easily, or maybe even more easily, than on the general street in times past. So the social media channels can also be like the streets. But then also, with the way we are living now, a person from any background, any walk of life, can have experiences with other people from any walk of life, and also have circumstances that reflect any walk of life. So if you can imagine, like, maybe say you have a child who's still a school age, like maybe later school age, like middle school or high school, and they're from a suburban background, and they're maybe even going to a suburban school, and then somebody antagonizes them to the point of threatening their physical safety, and they have to stand up for themselves, and they do answer for themselves physically. Whether or not they actually had to, on some level they answer for themselves physically. Now that person that they answered themselves to has other friends and comrades, even at a school age, who are actually inclined enough to as they would say, like, put in work, or to actually put forward violence on behalf of their friend and their camaraderie or their loyalty, however they understand that. And now this suburban child has to go to school, and they have an awareness that they actually have people laying on them and anticipating them and waiting on them, potentially plotting some type of retaliation on them in their very school setting, which different family members or school officials may or may not understand what's going on, the scope of that, how that can play out outside of school, whether these other students know where their address is, to then further lay on them. Or you can just see how serious that can be, that a child can be dealing with this in something that is as serious as anything that would happen in the street, yet they're a suburban child. And so I was thinking, like, they say that nothing is guaranteed in life except death and taxes, and I think the death part is right. But there are some people who are savvy enough, or maybe expats or business people, that can actually go to different national. They can transverse national boundaries, or even different regional principalities and locations in one nation they're from, and somehow evade or get over on taxes. So the tax part might not be entirely true, but the death part is true. And then also, I think it might be just more accurate to say we all get to experience hard stuff in this life, and what's hard to one person may not be hard to another, but sure enough, we do receive what's at our level that we have to deal with, and have our metal tested at one point and at multiple points in our life. And that can actually play out with something like a school-age child from a suburban background, if you can imagine that. So, but what I wanted to say is that what my understanding of really being street is in this setting that we're in is, I have my family is from Africa, and they existed like on reservations in rural areas of Africa. And my father tells me about people from these rural backgrounds who they could take like a totaled vehicle, and then they can fashion that total vehicle into something more appealing and meaner than like an imported car. If you can imagine, like, how far they could take a totaled vehicle with what ingenuity and value is left, with ingenuity they have and value is left in that car, and make it into something truly incredible and beyond what could be bought stock from a manufacturer. That's an example of what I think it is to be street, is to recognize, to be able to recognize value in all of its humble expressions, and have the ingenuity to engage with that and make something out of that. That's what it is to be street, and you can be from any walk of life and experience that. And so with that, I'm of the disposition where I can be what they would call, and I have been at different paths, game goofy enough to actually draw antagonism in a setting such as a church or a school. I can draw antagonism in these settings, even from high-ranking officials, just being myself and expressing myself at times. And yet, when I was in some of these settings, I've actually been ostracized to the point of being excommunicated from a faith body when I was a young person. And when that happened, there were some members of a faith circle who were from a real, authentic, rough street background, and had really accepted faith and reformed themselves to the point of really appreciating what faith is and what love is, coming from some of the roughest backgrounds. And some of these are the very people that when I was ostracized, whether or not I had brought that on myself or not, and probably the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but I still, I was the one out of line, if we're speaking from the fact that we always need to have upright conduct and respect for authority wherever we are, but there is a thing of speaking truth to power and challenging ourselves and others righteously and with propriety, and that's also part of faith. but even in doing that, the lines of authority are still important, and respect and heritage and seniority. That's all very important. But